Hello, everybody. I'm Dean Nakanishi, CEO of the Asian American Drug Abuse Program. ADAP has been serving this community for over 50 years, and we are so happy to have Karen Bass bring all of these folks here to talk about the important needs of substance abuse when it has to do with homelessness. It's an important part, and I've been chewing Karen Bass's ear for even when she was in Congress about the issues that we're having, and she brought all these folks here from all different levels here to talk about that and have a discussion. So thank you for coming out today, and we've had a nice day today overall. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dean, and let me just thank ADAP. I'm very proud to be here at the Asian American Drug Abuse Program, an organization that has been in our community for decades and an organization that I have worked with personally for decades. So I wanted to tell you a little bit about this morning. Today we welcome the second senior White House official to come to Los Angeles in barely over a month. Jeff Olivat, Executive Director of the U.S. Interagency Council on Homelessness, who is here on behalf of the President, standing side by side, arm in arm, as we confront the crisis of more than 40,000 Angelenos sleeping on our streets. When we met in the White House a few weeks ago, we talked about you coming here. And we wanted you to know that if the White House goal was to reduce homelessness in the United States by 25%, if you come to the epicenter of the country, you can actually make a significant dent in achieving that goal. So we started our morning off. We were at Skid Row. We did a tour of Skid Row, and we were at LA CAN, Community Action Network. And then after taking a tour of Skid Row, we went to one of the Inside Safe locations around 90th and Figueroa. It was a fairly large encampment that was right at the right on an off-ramp of a freeway. And a lot of times we have problems in those locations because it's Caltrans. And as you've heard me say from the very beginning, to address this problem, we need to have a complete alignment of every level of government, the federal, the state, the county, and the city. And as you know, over this last month, the city and the county have been working hand in hand. I will tell you, every time I go out to one of the encampment sites, especially on a day like today where it wasn't outreach so much, it was a move out day. So the people who were living in the encampment were all being moved, and we were working with Hopix, one of the community-based providers, and at the same time as they were registering them to move out, you know, they're doing assessments to see what their needs are, and then they boarded a bus and are in the motels now. It's a very exciting time because people are very thankful to be leaving the streets. After we got the people on the bus, we also went and talked to the neighbors that live near the encampment to find out what their needs were, what their concerns were, but also to talk to them about now that the encampment is moved. Now that the encampment is moved, we need to make sure that it doesn't repopulate with either new people who are unhoused and certainly not the same individuals who are in the motel who now will be there for a while and will then move into permanent supportive housing. So it was interesting. They gave us very concrete things that they wanted to see us do. They actually wanted some bushes cut down. They wanted some trees removed. They talked about how people were hiding in the areas. And so to prevent that, they wanted to make sure that we followed through with our commitment. And so as we move on, you know, it's been a little over, well, not quite a month that we've been doing Inside Safe. We're learning a lot. We certainly have encountered challenges that we will be addressing, but we're also eventually hoping to reach scale where we can be all over the city. We are doing multiple areas at the same time now, but we want to expand that even further. So let me just say that oftentimes it is not just an issue of resources, it's not just an issue of housing, but I have said passionately all along, if we do not address substance abuse and mental health, we are kidding ourselves in our ability to end homelessness in Los Angeles. So that is why we are at the Asian American Drug Abuse Program, because we wanted to highlight and emphasize the need to have substance substance abuse treatment as part of the continuum of care. And let me just say, I want to bring up Dean Olivat from the Interagency Council, and when we go to Q&A, I will acknowledge the people who are standing with me who represent a variety of services, including drug treatment programs. Jeff?
Thank you, Mayor Bass. I was on that bus with the mayor this morning and met a gentleman who had slept in a tent last night. He'll be sleeping in a motel tonight with a door that locks and the comfort of a bed and a warm bath. And I asked him, what happens then? And he said, housing, permanent housing. That's the pathway that we want to see. We don't want anybody sleeping on the streets and in the tents and in their vehicles. We need to get people inside as quickly as possible. And I think the work that Mayor Bass and her team are doing on Inside Safe is a remarkable first step. The next step has to be the permanency of housing and wraparound supports. That same gentleman also shared with me some of the mental health challenges he's struggling with. So, Mayor, to your point, we know that addressing mental health, substance use, and a range of other supports that people need is essential to making sure that exits from homelessness are permanently successful. The Biden-Harris administration is deeply committed not only to solving homelessness across the country, but to supporting you all in solving homelessness right here in Los Angeles. Our colleagues from HUD last week announced a new $60 million grant to Los Angeles to address unsheltered homelessness. We are thrilled that Los Angeles won one of those awards, and we hope that'll be a significant help in the work that you all are doing. We also, as Mayor Bass said, released a new federal strategic plan to prevent and end homelessness. It's called All In, and it lays out strategies to achieve a 25% reduction in homelessness in the United States by 2025. That is an ambitious goal, and it is one that we will not and cannot reach without Los Angeles. As your work goes, so will our work go nationally. And I believe, right down to my core, that we can solve homelessness right here in Los Angeles, and if we can solve it here, we can solve it anywhere. Mayor Bass, thank you for the leadership that you're providing, for the work that you do, and for the incredible team that you're assembling to get the job done.
Absolutely. Thank you. Yes, let me recognize everybody that is behind me, and then we will open up for Q&A. Mercedes Marquez, who is the Chief of Housing and Homelessness in the Mayor's Office. Helene Schneider, who is the Senior Regional Advisor for the U.S. Interagency Council on Homelessness. Dr. Valicia Adams-Kellum, the incoming CEO of LASA and currently working in the Mayor's Office, institutionalizing Inside Safe. Anne Marie Oliva, the CEO of the National Alliance to End Homelessness. Jason Pugh, Regional Administrator, Department of Housing and Urban Development. Lori Udit, Field Office Director from HUD. John Kuhn, Deputy Medical Center Director from the VA. Dashika Wikrima, Deputy Secretary for Homelessness. Al Sanella, CEO of the Tarzana Treatment Center. Dean Nakanashi, who opened us up, with CEO of ADAP. Sergio Fontanisi, CEO of Betzetic. That's not Betzetic. Jennifer Hart Dietz, CEO of PATH. Carmen Janiso, COO of Amity Foundation. And Tonya Boykin, COO of Weingart Foundation.
We'll take the first question from Barbara. Mayor Bass, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon.
Margaret from KNX. First of all, you were talking about the encampment today that you visited. How many people were in that encampment?
What was it? I think it was about 30. Was it about 30? Yes, about 30.
Have you received the $50 million yet that the council approved?
Yeah, well, we're in the process of that. It's at the controller's office, and that should be coming our way soon. Mercedes, is that? Yes.
And one more question, if you could. With
Sure.
regard to your meeting today here at ADAC, could you just speak a little bit about what you've learned by meeting?
Sure. I mean, I always learn when I come to these meetings. And the main thing are the barriers that the drug treatment programs face. So because of change in federal requirements, now the longest you can be in residential drug treatment is 90 days, 30 to 90 days. No one can gain their sobriety in 90 days, especially people who have been out on the street. So when we're looking at barriers that need to be removed, it's not always a matter of money. What we need to do is we need to have flexibility so that individuals who are not ready, who are not clean and sober after 90 days can stay longer like they used to. They used to be able to stay for 12 months.
Josh and then Phil.
Yeah. Hey, Mayor Bass, we've had a lot of focus on the clearing of encampments, getting folks that live there on buses. Talk about how the other steps after that are going. You mentioned the challenges. We've heard some reports of some of the motels' conditions being questionable, some people leaving those to go back on the street.
Well, we have, Josh and Felicia and Mercedes, I'll ask you to come forward too. We haven't heard about people going back to the encampments. The encampments those areas have been cleared, but you're absolutely correct. We did have a problem recently with one of the motels. It is challenging. We've been fortunate in the sense that we've been able to find motels, but we need so many more rooms than that. The other thing that's challenging is that not in every council district are there motels. So we don't want to ship people from one end of the community to the next. We want to keep them nearby where they were, but needless to say, that's challenging. And that's why it's so important that the council be united. So, when we hear about the problems, we're addressing them immediately, like the one with the motel, and so we're moving them out of that motel.
And the step after that.
And the step after that into permanent supportive housing.
How can the federal government help?
You could come on. Why don't you talk about the move-in, the housing days,
Yep.
and the Mercedes?
Well, thank you. I think the important thing to point out is Inside Safe is an arc, and it starts with getting people out of encampments into motels, into housing now. But just Friday, we connected 40 people who were in tents and encampments just a week before to housing, and they were already going to visit and begin to sign leases. So the movement is happening, and we're really excited about what's happening going forward. And we'll need more vouchers. We'll need more time-limited subsidies. We need more of everything. So I'm glad you're all here to help us.
Mercedes, would you like to share a few words?
And so as we do this work, we intersect with the barriers. Right? And so here we are with all of these partners. For instance, the state is here. They're helping us on documents. So as people are in the hotels and we're doing all of the intake and we're doing assessments, we're also figuring out what are their barriers to actually they themselves making it into a unit. And often it's IDs, it's all these things. So the state is here. They're helping us to come in to be side by side with us to now help people qualify and get them their IDs and as quickly as possible move them forward. And soon, when at these housing fairs that Dr. Adams is talking about, there'll not only be an opportunity for folks to look at the housing, but also to sign up for their IDs right then. So we're doing everything we can to not just move one step at a time, but to move concurrently all the different system steps that move us from encampments to hotels to permanent housing.
In Felicia, are we still at 206?
Closer to 250, and if all goes well, by the end of next week, we'll be over 300.
One thing I want to say about barriers that we're finding, because again, we're learning as we're doing this, and we're finding some of the barriers were actually imposed by us, by the city or by the county. And at a certain point, after we learn more about this, we do actually want to sit down with the media and talk about all the different barriers. That's why it's not always money. Sometimes it's regulatory relief, and sometimes it's not pointing at the feds or the state. It's kind of looking in the mirror.
We're going to go Phil and then Lynn.
Where does the Circle program fit into the Inside Safe strategy?
Are you familiar with the Circle program?
It's a good question. The Circle program isn't across the city in every area, but for the areas they're assigned, they're very helpful in doing some outreach and connecting with people in the encampments. So as far as I know, there's no sign that it will discontinue. Yeah, so I do believe they were funded, got some additional funds a few months ago.
Where is that in the arc?
Well, at the beginning of every arc are the encampments, and outreach to those encampments is where that begins. So to whatever extent the circle teams have those relationships, we lean on those relationships to get people inspired to say yes.
So they would supplement what you're doing?
They would supplement, and many of the large encampments have multiple teams and groups of folks doing outreach. So it could be LASA, it could be any of the service providers, and the circle team can be a part of that.
Lynn, right here.
Hi, Mayor Bass. Can you give us an update on the services that the Interagency participants are getting in terms of mental health and other social services? Are there enough resources that they're getting immediately, or is there a wait list? What's the status?
Do you want to respond?
There's always a need for more resources. I'm very encouraged by the work that is being inspired by the mayor and the board of supervisors to get county services and city services to people in the motels. One of the reasons why we started the Connect Days is because it's a way to really get people to come together and share what their needs are more immediately. And so that's case management, that's mental health. I know that some of the service providers are going to be providing circle groups, mental health supports for folks who are struggling with isolation, because that can happen when you get in the motels, and connect them to the Department of Mental Health for additional supports. So it's all coming together. We are building this system pretty quickly, but we have the support of the city, the county, the state, and the federal government, and we believe we'll be able to scale this up swiftly.
Let me just say that the goal is kind of what we had today. So with Hopix, they were doing intakes before people got on the buses, so they could assess them. Now, where we want to go eventually is that on day one, there's a complete array of services, but we are not there yet. And more money is needed, more resources are needed, and in general, the workforce. We don't have enough social workers or counselors or any of that, but we're going to have to come up with innovative ideas for doing that. For example, one of the things I hope to do is to partner with the various social work schools, because social work students have to do their internship. We're going to need to look at tuition support. We're going to need to be very creative to reach the capacity of the type of services that are needed. And right now we're working with all the different social service agencies involved in this work, but much, much more is needed.
Yeah, this is anybody who wants to answer it. A lot of times when we talk about the federal government, it comes down to dollars. But what else can the federal government do to support what the city's doing, the county, the state, to kind of...
Two things actually that I mentioned, but let me be more specific. The idea that someone can only be in treatment from 30 to 90 days. The idea that only 16 people can be in a facility. That's actually a regulation from 50 years ago. So some of those things are in law and it needs to be changed. But hopefully the federal government might be able to do an executive directive or executive order that does, that allows a waiver. From the perspective of it being an emergency, when you have an emergency and a disaster, sometimes you're able to have flexibility, but those are just two examples. And again, we have found this kind of thing on every level. Where we did it, we can have the flexibility.
Can I step on that?
Yes.
I'll take a shot at that as well. Certainly the funding is a huge piece of what the federal government does, and we're doing everything we can to continue to invest in housing, in mental health and substance use, in homelessness resolution strategies on the budgeting side. On the regulatory side, which the mayor referenced, I think we can do a lot to examine some of those barriers, and we heard some of that here at ADAP a little while ago around some of the barriers to substance abuse treatment. The length of stay is one. There are others just around how programs are funded and then what happens after the program. So we're examining all of that at the federal level. The other thing that we do is lay out a blueprint for a national strategy that we hope localities like Los Angeles will take and use as a local blueprint. So I'll give you a very concrete example of that. We know that we have to address the crisis of unsheltered homelessness. Inside Safe is a great example of how to do that. But we've got to also attend to the permanent housing and supportive services that help end homelessness. If we only do those two things and we don't prevent homelessness from happening in the first place, we will have failed. So one thing that we're trying to do at the federal level is continue doing the things that are working on housing people and providing wraparound services, scale those up, and also begin moving to look at inflow into homelessness to make sure it never happens in the first place. That's going to be a local, federal, state partnership as well to really understand what works and how best to do that.
We're going to go right here, and then we'll circle back to Margaret and Phil.
Good afternoon, Several Montan, USCN Media. Earlier there was a mention of how LA can be sort of a comparison to the federal level. What do you think Angelino should be an eye out or well an ear out in tonight's State of the Union address in regards to maybe housing in this aspect or anything of that?
Well, you know, actually, in the State of the Union, everybody's always looking to see if the president's going to mention their issue. So you better believe I'm going to be listening to see if he references that 25% reduction. And then I also think just the economy and housing in general. So all of that, hopefully, we'll hear.
Mr. Olivet, can I ask you a quick question?
Yeah,
Have you been to LA before?
I have been to LA before, yes.
So what do you hope to learn from this trip that maybe you didn't know before?
I think one thing that's changing is the sense of urgency. And, the urgency has been there for many, many years among people experiencing homelessness who know this is a life and death crisis, among the service providers who are working with them every day. But the urgency has not always been there among those in leadership. And I think the urgency that Mayor Bass is bringing to this work, the urgency that the county and the state are bringing to this work, and the urgency that we're bringing at the federal level, it feels very different to me. And I've been in this work for almost 30 years, locally and nationally all over the country. And it feels like we're at a different point right now. We're at a crossroads where public sympathy is wearing thin, public outrage is growing. And if we're not able to show meaningful reductions and fast, we're in danger of losing all public support for what we're trying to do. And so I think the urgency that we're all bringing to it is first and foremost about the life and death nature of homelessness, and then about the belief that if we can get everybody in this together, believing that it's possible to reduce and ultimately end homelessness, then we start really making progress.
So you talk about substance abuse. What's the generally accepted figure, the percentage of homeless that are suffering substance abuse, and what's the definition of substance abuse?
This is for a 2-hour press conference of its own, I think, if we really wanted to get into it, and I'd be happy to talk separately as well. If you look at the broader homeless population, it's very nuanced and complicated. There are visible folks living on the street, but there are also families and youth and elderly people and folks in vehicles. It's very hard to pin down an exact number. A lot of the most recent data that I've seen, if we just isolate unsheltered homelessness, we see significant rates of substance use. The low end of that estimate is usually about 30%, could be upward from there. But when you start looking at families and children and youth, the majority of people experiencing homelessness don't have substance use issues, but a significant proportion do. And when we get into unsheltered homelessness, substance use is really significant, mental health issues are really significant, and so those need to be part of the equation.
Last question here.
And Mayor, just circling back to that 50 million, you said it's coming. Do you have like an estimated timeline?
Did you hear what she said, an estimated timeline? Because it's not, it should be any day.
Yeah, they just have to set up the account and be ready.
Yeah. And let me just conclude by thanking the members of the press that are here. But I want to thank all of our partners that are here today, because I know that all of us recognize that in order to deal with this issue, we all have to stick together. And we started talking about a complete alignment of government some time ago. And I will remind you that in June of last year, Secretary Fudge came here from Housing and Urban Development. And then just last week, Jason Poo brought the $60 million check that represents the fruits of the labor from that visit, where we raised the significance of homelessness in Los Angeles. And I'm happy to say that our federal partner responded with the $60 million, and that we hope to be one of the cities that the White House targets for the emphasis and the extra attention and resources in order to meet the national goal of reducing homelessness by 25%. Thank you very much.